Durk Banks was born October 19, 1992. He was raised in Englewood, a neighborhood on the south side of Chicago. His father was known as Big Durk, and he was incarcerated for selling crack cocaine in the early 90s. It was reported that his dad had upwards of $8 million that was seized during his arrest. After this, Durk took on a lot of the responsibility as he was considered the man in the house. With his father gone, his mother and family struggled for the basic needs to get by. He says there were times when he couldn't eat because there was no money for food at home. Eventually, they all moved into his grandmother's house, where 10 people stayed in 3 bedrooms. His mother was working long hours as a nurse, so there was never much of a barrier between Durk and the streets. By the time he was in 5th grade, staying out till 4 or 5 in the morning became a normal thing for him. He came to the conclusion that the only way he could take care of his family would be to follow in his dad's footsteps. So at age 10, he hopped off the porch and hustled for money. This progressed into his teen years until he eventually joined the Black Disciples who controlled the Englewood neighborhood. The violence in the area was so bad that it became normal to lose friends or family every few months. Although the streets occupied most of his time, he took a key interest in rapping. He created a MySpace account that was quickly gaining a small amount of followers, which encouraged him even more to release music. He and his childhood friends created their own brand called OTF, or Only the Family. But juggling school and becoming a dad at just 17 was becoming hard to manage, so he decided to drop out altogether in order to pursue his career. He started dropping music around 2010 online under the name Lil Durk. Initially, his style was heavily influenced by Lil Wayne, and most of his songs were just remixes. But from 2010 to 2011, Durk started to find his own unique sound. At the time, there were a lot of rappers from the nearby area who were all trying to get heard. This included Chief Keef, Fredo Santana, Lil Reese, SD, Lil Durk, and more. Because they were all part of the Black Disciples and friends with each other, they formed another group called 300. Durk still had his OTF, but he was a part of the larger group 300 now. This meant they could click up and benefit from one another as all their popularity grew. Durk released a song called Amahita in March of 2011. He recalls it getting over 10,000 views. It was a small victory, but at the time this reassured him that he was on the right path. Shortly after, he released his first mixtape with the same title in hopes of gaining some buzz. It worked, and a small momentum formed around his name, as the song started to get 5 to 20,000 views consistently. Unfortunately, his association in the streets was holding him back, as trouble with the law continued. He ended up getting locked up for a gun charge with the defaced serial number, which landed him a few months behind bars. Once released, though, he was at a crossroad. His music was getting heard, but he was still struggling to get by. On the bright side, the entire Chicago drill movement was blowing up, which only benefited Durk in his come-up. Unlike most drill rappers who all shared a similar style, Durk started to stand out with his ability to rap, but also deliver a melodic singing flow. He applied this to his sequel mixtape, I'm Still a Hit, in 2012 with the lead single L's Anthem. L's Anthem was a controversial song in the streets and was even said to have made the war in Chicago worse. But regardless, it blew up and received millions of plays, taking Durk from a local artist to his name reaching all over. Immediately, record labels were already calling to sign the promising superstar. He inked a deal with Def Jam for an undisclosed amount the next month. Now, at the time, Durk thought this would be the highlight of his career. He signed a deal, and now he'd be able to move his entire family out of the hood. But really, this was just the beginning. He still had to put the work in, but before he got the chance, he was once again booked and locked up for another 3 months. Once released, he dropped his third mixtape, Life Ain't No Joke, which had multiple hit songs like 52 Bars and Right Here. Going into 2013, Lil Durk was riding a wave of momentum, and it seemed like nothing was going to stop him. He dropped This Ain't What You Want, and just like he had hoped for, it did better than he could have ever imagined. This song got over 40 million views alone and skyrocketed his career. Although things were looking better than ever, trouble always had a way of interrupting things. Durk was locked up again, this time with a $100,000 bail. This event would actually begin the falling out of Durk and Chief Keef. While Durk was behind bars, he reached out to Chief Keef and asked him to help him out. But unfortunately, Keef turned his back and went shopping that same day, leaving Durk hanging. Eventually, Durk was released, but from this point, he mostly stuck in his own plane. The two did eventually resolve their issues, but it created tension between them for a while. He had a huge clout now, but was still chasing that superstar status. Despite dealing with legal issues, Durk always stayed consistent, dropping mixtapes every 6 months or so. Side of the Streets 1 and 2 were both very successful drops, and he was 17 featured on the 2014 XXL Freshman. But it's really what happens after this that made his entire career. From 2015 to 2018, Durk continued his grind. His debut album Remember My Name was released and sold 24,000 copies in its first week. These were pretty decent numbers for his first album, considering he was still trying to break completely out into the mainstream. Although he had signed a deal and was consistently a name being brought up, it seemed like his career was starting to go stagnant. Some critics stated that this was as far as his talents would take him and this would be his peak. At the time, there was some truth to this. In 2016, he dropped his second album Lil Durk 2 times, only selling 12,000 copies in its first week. His albums and mixtapes were not selling the kind of numbers the label felt like they should have been. He had yet to make another song that had surpassed his 2013 This Ain't What You Want. He ended up leaving Def Jam and signing a new deal with Alimony Interscope. Durk knew he had to switch things up, so he started to focus his energy on his own label, OTF, signing new artists and pushing that brand over his solo music. This didn't pay off right away, but he didn't give up and never strayed away from his consistency. Around 2018, things really started to pick up. He released a collab tape with other OTF artists called Only the Family Involved. Shining light on these other artists that were now buzzing was to help bring more attention to Durk in his campaign. One of these artists was King Von, who had recently beat a murder case and picked up rapping as soon as he came home. Durk took Von under his wing and even released some of his first songs on his own YouTube channel to promote him. Although other OTF members were gaining popularity too, King Von was blowing up fast after the release of his Crazy Story trilogy. Von and Durk became inseparable, and it looked like Von was the missing puzzle piece that Durk had been looking for. As OTF started to become more recognized as a label, Durk's career seemed to benefit from this in a massive way. A whole new generation of listeners were now turning into Durk that weren't before. Lil Durk is one of the few who was patient enough to wait over a decade to reach his full potential, and he's still growing to this day. Thank you guys for watching. If you want more videos like this, make sure to like the video and hit the subscribe button, and we will see you in the next video.